Fans of award-winning author Tim O'Brien will be thrilled to know that he's back with his first book in 18 years, this one very personal. Tim is here to tell us what inspired Dad's Maybe book. Hi there.
Hi.
What a title. Tell me about that.
My son Tad, younger son, came up with the title. I had been writing little messages in a bottle, love letters to my children, basically, and putting them in a desk drawer during the first 10 years of being a father. And one day, Tad came into my office, a 7-year-old, saw the pages in the drawer, and asked me, will this be a book? And I said, I don't know. It might end up at the bottom of a trash can. And he said, well, what if it doesn't? What if it does become a book? Will it be one? And I said, well, maybe. And he very sternly said to me, well, you've got to call it what it is. Be honest. Call it your maybe book.
It's Dad's Maybe book.
And I did. Because in a way, every book is a maybe book until it's finished.
Yeah, but here it is.
And here it is.
You wrote the book, The Things They Carried, which I think so many people have, read and loved, and was so profound. So you took this break in writing because you embarked on an even greater adventure.
I did.
Tell me a little bit about that.
Well, I became a father at 56. And as soon as my first son was born, it occurred to me that when my son began to know me, he'd know an old man, which is how it panned out. Here I am, looking to them just as I look to you.
You look fantastic to me, but there you are with one of your little ones. Is this the first one?
That's the first son, yeah. There's a little episode about how I was writing the first chapter of this book, and in that picture, a moment after it was taken, he reached out, hit the computer, and deleted everything I was writing. It was all gone.
See, those are some first-time father lessons. Do not have the kid on the keyboard.
Don't hold him in your lap.
But one of the things that happened was, yes, you faced, okay, mathematically, maybe I'm not going to be here for another 50 or 60 years, but I have some things to say and I have some things to bring to this party. How did you work that out?
Well, I thought of my own dad and wishing that he had left me messages for when he was gone. And he died, and I yearned so much for a final goodbye, a few words of how much he loved me and his memories. And I thought my own children deserve that. They deserve to hear a voice when they're in their middle age, their father talking to them, maybe not literally, but through the pages of a book.
That is such a generous thing to do. I mean, not only to imagine what their experience is going to be like, but also for you to bring what seems to me like in this book, the wisdom of life that I don't know you, but I'm guessing you couldn't have offered at 25.
Oh, for sure, for sure. I learned as much from my children as I've taught my children in all kinds of ways. For instance, at one point we were vacationing in southern France and at a way too expensive resort. Totally out of place. Everybody else looked like George Hamilton. I looked like this. And at one point the phone rang, and it was my sister calling and telling me that my mom had died. And my children, who were then 7 and 9, were playing ping pong at an outdoor ping pong table. And I went over and told them my mom had died. They didn't say much. I didn't say much. And a couple of hours later, we were walking down a hill to go to dinner with the Mediterranean below and purple twilight all around us. And I took my son Timmy's hand and I said, are you thinking about Grandma? And he said, no. I'm thinking about you thinking about Grandma.
Wow, how perceptive is that?
And that's how you learn empathy. And I thought all he thought about was little boy stuff, ping pong.
Right.
But instead, he had this sense of otherness and what was happening in my emotions. And that empathy taught me a lesson about how I ought to be more empathetic in the world.
But you must have modeled it a bit, or he wouldn't have seen it, right?
Yeah.
I'm guessing somewhere.
You're right.
I mean, I think today one of the cool things about the way we've changed is that we're not so judgmental about how other people form their families, whether they're young or they're older or middle-aged or whatever it is, whatever shape it is, if you're blood relations, if you're not, that in the end it's about who we love. It's about love.
In the end, every book I've written, even my books about war, which I'm best known,
yes,
are ultimately books about love for peace and love for your hometown and your family who is across the other side of the world. This book is more conspicuously about love, but I feel that that's what, through my whole career, I've been trying to get at, is how the human being, unlike chipmunks, we can love and we can understand others, or at least try to.
In this particular time where things are very fractious and people speak to each other, I think, in the harshest way I recall in my lifetime.
Me too.
The idea that we have this capacity for love, and that as you head forward in life and you get farther along, it feels to me like the gray zone of your vision brings you down to that idea. I'm hopeful that if people read this book, that they'll maybe take that lesson in sooner in life. Is that what you hope?
That's exactly what I hope, but I hope that at Christmas time, that dads are given the book, because in that silent Christmas Eve feeling, the closeness of family and love for humanity is really important. And it's a reminder to all of us of what's really valuable in our lives. We get so caught up in the hubbub of bridge tournaments and cocktail parties and all the other things that surround us that it's easy to lose sight of it. And I know in my case, until I had kids, I had lost sight of what was really important.
Boy, there is a river of life experience that happens when you get to that point, right?
And there sure is.
And so was it hard after 18 years? I mean, you've had this wonderfully successful and profound writing career, but you had left it behind for a while, and now Dad's maybe book is going to be Dad's definite book.
Now it's Dad's book. I'm going to have to change the title and get rid of the...
It's just Dad's book now.
It was hard. I mean,
can you get in there and really discipline yourself to write right away, or did it take a while?
Well, I made a decision that I had to be a good father. I mean, that was foremost. And to do it, I had to quit writing. You can't spend 15 hours a day. You have to be writing. You have to be present for your children. You can't, if you're not present, you can't instruct or
Showing up is the first
Showing
requirement.
up is number one. So I did quit. I gave up a career in order to be a decent father. And it was a little hard getting back into remembering. And I had to begin to write. I had to begin getting up around 1:30 or 2 in the morning.
Wow.
Just to have time. I go to bed at 5 in the afternoon, but I needed silence to write. And it was hard at first, but I was so determined to have my 2 boys know how much their dad loved them and cared about their futures and that they have happy lives, that I just did it.
Yeah. It is a beautiful book. It would make a beautiful gift. I think anybody can relate to, the vast expanse of a parent's heart. Thank you so very much.
What a pleasure.
Appreciate it. By the way, you can catch up with Tim at Elliott Bay Book Company tonight at 7 o'clock. We have all the details you need on our website.